right, this is a special episode of Dialogue Options. Well, they're all special, but this is special. It's our first round table, even though there is no table and the window is square. I've got Meredith Placco and Ash Shao returning to previously popular guests, both journalists, and that's what we're talking about today. We're continuing our discussion about journalism, the general media, social media, and eventually games journalism. Ladies, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, I think this might be one of the few cases in recorded media history where it's three women and it just sort of happened. It's not, the topic is not women, it's just journalism, but we happen to be the ones talking about that. Ash, you've got the political beat. I wonder if you want to sort of start us off by commenting on this sort of identifiable identity politics in media and what your thoughts are about that.
Well, yeah, the media, and we've talked about this before, it's constantly, if you want to include every perspective, but it's more of a, like, you know, we need to cover our asses type situation where, you know, if you're talking about race and you don't happen to have anyone who's non-white on there, then you're going to get flack for it. But then you have someone who's non-white on there. If they have the wrong perspective, then you might get attacked for that. Or if there's only one non-person of color talking about this, then you're going to, you know, get some flack for it. Same thing with, like, women's issues or, you know, really anything. And it's just this whole idea that of the right person has to be reporting on the story because no one else can possibly have an accurate opinion on it. And that spills over into politics, where you see, you know, these calls for more women representation, and I'm fine with that if women want to run. But this idea that, like, we have to have 50% and 50% because, you know, like, basically setting up a quota, which to me always seems like wrong, because it's like politicians are supposed to represent their constituents, and their constituents are about 50-50. So if you're going to say that, like, that has to be the case, and, like, a woman in Arizona is not representing women in New York and what they want, and a man in Seattle isn't representing a man in Wyoming, you know, like, so you can never possibly actually represent every side that you want. And if we do get to the point where, like, we want 50% men, 50% women, then don't you want to break it down every way? So it's like, okay, well, then we also have to have this many black women, we have to have this many Hispanic men, we have to have this many LGBT, you know, and, like, it just starts to be like, okay, all right, there's an election coming up, guys, and we have too many white people. So, congressman from New Hampshire, you got to stop running because we need this particular identity in Congress right now. And, like, it just gets absurd to me. And I'm definitely not against anyone non-white and non-male running. Like, obviously run, but to the point where it's like we need this many, it starts to get a little ridiculous.
Now, just to be clear, no one here right now is an advocate of, you know, 50% or else hard quota, because I know I'm not.
I'm just confused. When did we stop caring about the politicians' politics?
Exactly.
And caring about their gender and identity. I want to vote for the politician that's going to stand by what I believe in, and that happens to be equality and representation, but I don't really care what gender or ethnicity or how they identify themselves. They could identify themselves as a spoon for all I care, but as long as they believe in the things that I represent, I'm going to vote for them.
Right, absolutely. I mean, like, that's where all of this comes down to is, now, if you talk about your wedge issues, but in general, from certain polls that we've seen, versus Democrats versus Republicans here in America, that Republican women tend to say that the issues that are most important to them are the same issues that Republican men say. So, like, foreign policy, terrorism, the economy, things like that. But on the liberal side, it's a little different, where men might say economy, big banks or foreign policy or something like that, and the women will tend to say more like abortion and like the little wedge issues and stuff. But so that's like, so if that's your issue, then me being, a more right-leaning woman, those are my issues. So I'm like looking at the issues, as you said, like not, well, I want to vote for her just because she's a woman. I'm going to vote for a man who's doing the right things on my issues. But now it's just, there's so much identity politics, and you see it in the way politicians speak, which is why
the dog whistle phenomenon.
Right. Part of the reason that you see a rise in Trump, and I'm not a Trump fan at all, but part of the reason you see it is that he's speaking to a specific part of the electorate that has been ignored by both parties in their quest to bring on women, bring on Hispanics, bring on African Americans, whereas Donald Trump is now seeing that the working class whites in this country are getting ignored in favor of these other groups, and he's speaking to them.
Well, I think this is quite a significant thing, especially, Meredith, with your beating comics, because we're seeing this replicate. We're seeing this replicate in politics. We're seeing this replicate definitely in video games, and we're seeing this replicate in comic books. So, Meredith, as somebody who is the other, like me, in your beat, how do we create an inclusive environment instead of being this whole, we're going to sort of slice everything up based on how you look, as opposed to creating more paradigm like pre-1980s media, where there was one TV set in everybody's house, so it had to be a compromised show. How do we get back to sort of that big tent approach to media?
I'm all for, I say write what you know, and I say write inclusivity. And it's like, it's going to sound really interesting what I'm about to say, because it's going to kind of go against each other. But like, when you have your big properties, your DCs and your Marvels, just write stories about characters. I don't care if they're gay or lesbian or having to deal with poverty or having to deal with being a Muslim American, like in the Amazing series as the new Miss Marvel. These are great stories. They're also dealing with real life issues that many of our incoming Americans or established Americans have to face. But at the end of the day, don't force these issues. I feel like Miss Marvel is a great example, because it's just it's a story. At the end of the day, it's a story. Does it have a slight agenda? Yeah, it does, but it's telling a real-life story that many people have to go through who live in this country. You look at maybe some webcomics or some more independent comics that I feel are almost shoehorning the issue, and some people, some of the writers and creators from this stuff that are trying to be very vocal about these issues. But it's always important to be, if you're passionate about something you want to change, of course you want to be vocal about it. But the more you're vocal and demanding of things, the more you're going to alienate the others. And the others might be the masses, the mainstream, the status quo. But I guess maybe, and I'm just going to say it, like, I'm a conservative liberal. Like, everyone seems to think that I'm this, like, super...
Unicorn.
Huh?
Unicorn.
Yeah, like, everyone seems to think, like, I'm like, all pro everything, Bernie Sanders 100%, and that I'm like, I want socialized everything. People just seem to think I'm like this super, everything needs to be this one way, and I'm not. I'm finally coming out and saying it. This is breaking news, everyone. I'm finally free to say this.
You heard it here first.
I know, you heard it here first. But I've been watching, especially on Tumblr, especially on Twitter. I've been watching a lot of, artist rallies across comic book conventions across the U.S. And, I meet a lot of younger women specifically, and they cry for representation. And I want that too. I want equality, and I want to be able to hang out with all of my friends of every gender and every ethnicity without there being any sort of issue. But I feel like the more that we try to force it, the more it's going to be rejected. Because the problem is anytime you try to force something upon someone else, they don't want that. And how you see that? Look at all these little niche groups whenever they feel put upon, whenever they feel that they're having their rights infringed upon. and look at how they react. Doesn't it really suck to be told that what you believe is wrong and is terrible? Even if it kind of is, because racism is terrible, because nobody's saying racism's right here. But if you grew up believing that, it's going to take being more than being told you're a terrible person to change. So
Right.
my thing in the comic world, and yes, you know, I get shit because I'm a woman. I do. I finally gotten to that realm where people are like yelling at me online, telling me terrible things, calling me a cunt. I think for the first time we talked, I'm like, I've never gotten any of that. Nope, now I am.
Oh, you've hit the Kool-Aid point.
I have. It's really nice. It's fun.
Yeah.
I get to troll the fuck out of people. But and even at comic book conventions, you know, I still get creators who are like, "Oh, are you here with your boyfriend? Oh, are you? Oh, that's so nice. They hired such a pretty young girl to interview me." But you know, I just roll with it, and I just do my fucking job, and I do the best job I can to prove to them that I'm the right person for it.
Right, because if you prove it that way, rather than being like, stop, you sexist little misogynist pig, let me tell you while you're like, are they gonna be like, oh no, I like women, or are they gonna like go back and be like, this bitch, like, you know, and that's one of the things I've seen in the comic world where rather than introducing a new character, and sometimes when they've introduced new characters, they've been pretty bad about it, but now we're at a point where rather than introducing a new character, from what I've seen, we're just taking existing characters that everybody knows and loves and just making them something else. Like there was a whole announcement last year that like Thor, they're going to make Thor a woman, right?
And she ended up not being Thor.
Right, because that's not Thor. Like, no, you couldn't have introduced like another female Norse the mythology character like Freya, right? Like you could have introduced Freya, who is awesome, you know, and like that could have been a thing, but no, we're just gonna make Thor a woman, or we're gonna make Spider-Man black, or we're gonna make this character gay now, you know, where it's like these characters have been around for decades, everybody knows and loves them, and then all of a sudden everything you've already known and loved is completely being changed, not because of any like demand really for it other than like a small subset of like angry people that are like saying you need to do this, but mainly for like the news headlines about it. Like you're just angering people or upsetting people from things that they know just for headlines, really, at this point.
Well, Meredith, do you want to catch this one? Because this is your beat. Because I've seen from creators sort of the counterpoint to this of why they do that headline grabbing.
Well, so going back to Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel, I thought that was brilliant how they did it. So Captain Marvel, the former Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, she kind of graduated over the Captain Marvel role, and so we had this emptiness, and so they created, a new character through the Inhumans' power. She was not a mutant and not, whatever. But she took on the title Miss Marvel because she was so in love with Miss Marvel, and they had this wonderful moving moment in the comics where Captain Marvel comes down and kind of like, says, "You have earned this title, I'm so proud of you." And it was a really great changing of the guard, and I loved how they did that.
That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, that was great. I know the Thor thing really ruffled a lot of feathers. Ultimately, the way they did pull it off, I liked, because the character that became Thor was a longtime love interest from Thor. It's been out long enough. I'm going to say who it is.
Yeah, this is not a spoiler anymore.
Sorry, spoiler alert. It's been out long enough. It's Jane Foster.
Mm-hmm.
So she'd been dying of cancer, and when Thor lost the ability to wield Mjolnir through actions that proved him unworthy, Jane was able to lift Mjolnir, and while this is accelerating her death, she's able to kind of do some good for what time is left for her. And I know it upset a lot of people, but then once it was revealed that it was Jane Foster, people are like, oh, okay, and we know it's a finite storyline. But then there are times that they're just arbitrarily like just changing characters, which, realistically, could we just relaunch Superman as black and it not be a problem? Yeah, we could, because it doesn't matter. In fact, I think Superman needs a complete overhaul, because that character has never been relatable to me, because I don't know.
I know people who love Superman. Yeah. He's one of the ones I'm like, he's so boring. Like, when he started, he was so perfect that like they had to add in kryptonite because like he couldn't be beaten, and it was just boring. So like, yeah, he's always been a boring character to me.
if you want to reboot Superman, stop DC, stop trying to be like, oh, he's edgy and he's cool. Like, no, completely reboot him. Make him, if he's supposed to be an alien, make him a different race in Middle America. Put him as like, I don't know, put him as a Muslim in Middle America and see how he feels.
Actually, do you want to hear my radical theory for how to reboot Superman and make him relevant?
Yes.
And change nothing? Well, elaborate on something. But where's Superman from? What's a fundamental part of Superman's thing? He's from Kansas.
Yeah.
Right? He's a Kansas farm boy. Make him a Republican. Make him a moderate Republican, because Kansas is Republican territory. If he grows up ma and pa, he's raised in this sort of cornbread, because, I mean, that was the whole thing with him and Lois. She was very metro. He was sort of cornbread. And make him a moderate Republican, because he's been raised in it, and kind of have that clash of cultures. The way they kind of do so nicely on Supergirl with, I think, the breakout character that surprised everybody was Callista Flockhart as Cat Grant.
Mm-hmm.
I love this character because I think she's one of the most realistic portrayals of what a woman has to do to get to one of those positions. Like, I don't know if either of you have worked for a woman like that. I sure did.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
It was a similar evolution that at first you're like, why are you trying to eat me? And then the more you sort of learn about this tough as nails woman, you realize she's like that for a reason. Mm-hmm. It didn't just happen. And this is sort of leaning in sometimes involves biting someone's face off. And I don't know if you guys have hit the point in your careers where you start catching yourself doing that, like, oh my God, I've had a Cat Grant moment. Like, maybe we can talk about this, because this is something I think that people don't talk about, because it does defy that sort of, you have to be nice and you have to be, there's Perry White and J. Jonah Jameson and all these tropes of the male editor. But we haven't had a character like her before. Meredith, you seem ready to.
I was raised in the bullpen. I mean, my very first, she wasn't the news director, but she was the executive producer of the evening newscast, so I worked under her, and I thought she hated me. I could have sworn, like, Cynthia, I was her worst enemy, and I'm like, I'm not going to keep this job, and oh my God, I'm going to, like, and I would go home, I would cry. I thought I was, like, the worst. I thought I was just going to quit news and never go back. And then one day I came into work, and she's like, all right, we're going to move you dayside. And I was like, man, I guess I really screwed up, she's just getting me out. And then she's like, yeah, because I'm taking over dayside. I was like, oh, okay. She's like, yeah, I want to move you with me because I want to keep working with you. And then she started putting me on, like, the big network calls, and, like, because we were just a local affiliate station, but, like, I'd be taking the big calls. And Cynthia, while it was my first news station, she was the EP who worked with me to be the journalist I am today. And you remember that, like, weird, like, term, like, you had, like, bitch boss and boss bitch. And she totally was like that bitch boss who became the boss bitch, or vice versa, or however that phrase worked. I never really got into that. But I learned so much from her, and she could be mean as fuck, man, but she taught me everything I needed to know in this industry, and I love her for it. But there are times, like, probably because of it, I have a thick skin, and I never cried in a newsroom after that, I'll tell you that. And I'd have news directors scream at me. But I am very much the same. Like, there was recently at an event a couple months ago, I also sometimes will do programming and event management for conventions, and I was having some issues with a staffer. And I had to pull him aside, and I had to have a very honest conversation with him, and I realized I was channeling Cynthia for that. And you know what, though? I was like, and afterwards I was like, God, was I too harsh on him? And I realized the whole weekend he had stepped up and he was doing great. And I was like, you know what? There's a difference between being mean and there's a difference between being straight. And sometimes there's just that attitude, and some people will break and buckle and probably, like, quit or call you mean and say that you're, like, I don't know, abusing them and emotionally wrecking them.
Oh, I've got that.
Right. Yeah. That's the line you walk, because, like, I don't have the talent to say, or that skill of not coming across of just being mean rather than straight. So when I'm like, okay, we need to, this is what you're doing, like they go and run and then I end up getting in trouble, right? So like it's a particular skill that like some people have, and it's not a, I don't, it might be a gender thing, I don't know, but you know that some people just don't, like you were able to take that person aside and tell them straight up and then they fixed. Whereas if I had taken that person aside, it probably would have come off in a way that would have made them run to some sort of supervisor, and then they would have been like, what did you just say to this person? You know, like, I don't have that particular skill.
But that's not just you either, I think, that paradigm. That has to do with all three people involved. Because as a supervisor, I have had people come to me going, so-and-so did this. And I'm like, well, why? And once you start getting the why, the minute you ask somebody why, it makes them accountable. And that's what a supervisor has to do. You can't just jump on every complaint you get. And unfortunately, you know, this is another media paradigm as well, that there is this expectation that a publisher will publicly address every single complaint. And it's just not possible. And you have to protect your people. So, you know, my question is, so what? If you were a little too rough on somebody that day, so what? Like, what have you been told, Ash, that has given you this sense that, you know, it's a skill you don't have, as opposed to it being that person not being able to take criticism? Because let's face it, on the internet, we all know what paradigm it would end up being.
Right. Well, it's just my whole life. I've always been like, there, people are complaining, I'm complaining, and like this has gone back to like high school, middle school, right? So everybody's sitting around complaining, and I'm like, well, let me do something about it, right? So I go forward and I actually like bring up the issue with the person we're complaining about, and then it just always comes back to somehow me getting in trouble and nobody else backs me up. So it's like, it's a little different dynamic, but because of that situation happening throughout my entire life, where like I try to stand up for the people and then like I end up getting in trouble for it. It's like, it's just kind of beaten me down to this point where it's like I can never bring up an issue with people because I always end up being in trouble.
You're describing the textbook alternative aggression paradigm. And this is something, this is a good pivot, because moving into this whole social media thing, I think that is sort of that is something we're seeing replicate over and over and over and over again online. We just saw it recently with the whole Daisy Ridley thing. That was pretty much it, is people do these things all the time. In this case, it's sending nasty, I call them nasty grams, you know, nasty messages to a public person with that public person tagged in. And Daisy Ridley was finally the person that went, you know, I'm a human being with feelings, and I'm not going to take this. I'm going to respond to this person. Of course, on too many social networks, you can't win, because if you reference something without being specific, then you're subtweeting, and some people think that's bad. But if you actually respond to the person, it includes their personal information in it, which can indirectly cause a dogpile. And that's what happened in this Daisy Ridley thing, is her 1.4 million fans or something like that descended on this person that body shamed, and this person turned out to be a developmentally handicapped or disabled 17-year-old. And all of a sudden that changed the story. And I am fascinated by this story because of the various components, that the entire story reset retroactively because of the identity of the person who said the original mean thing. And I'm wondering about your guys' opinion. Well, we'll start with Ash this time, because this is something that's personally affected her. Let's unpack this. Like, is the criticism of the 17-year-old too harsh? Is the criticism of Daisy Ridley too harsh? Is this something that should be a story at all?
Well, I think to the first two questions, it's yes, it was too harsh for both of them. So, I mean, the story you're describing is that the meme was about saying that real women have curves, and therefore Daisy should never have been cast because she's thin and she's sending a bad body message, which, just on a personal note, I am sick of that, because I am so sick of being a thin woman and being told I don't exist and that I'm not a real woman because I don't have fat. Like, because I'm not larger. I've been thin my entire life. Me and my brother were both super scrawny children despite always eating. I mean, I'm a picky eater, so that's always been my problem. But I mean, a story that I had heard from my parents that like apparently they were once approached with if they needed food stamps to feed me and my brother because we were so thin that they thought we were just too poor to feed them. It's like, no, we eat macaroni and cheese and hot dogs all the time. Like, we eat fatty foods. We're just like little people. And like now I grow up and I mean I'm a tiny person and I just had like noodle soup last night and like a medium bag of popcorn at the movie theater, and like I eat, and I think I had like a burger and a steak like the night before. Like I eat all the time. I'm just a thin person, right? So I am sick of being told that I like shouldn't exist and that like I must be starving myself or I must be sticking my fingers down my throat in order to be thin. That's a type of body shaming that is completely allowed in society now, and like I think just as unacceptable as saying that, you know, you're overweight, therefore you're not beautiful. You know, like what Daisy was saying is that what's inside is what should matter. But then she comes out and she responds to it, and you know, and she was much more polite and politically correct than I would be. And then, you know, the person that she was responding to, like you said, got a whole bunch of hate, and they're then accusing her basically of like dogpiling. When, like, I mean, that happens. Like, I do it on Twitter, and I keep realizing, like, I need to stop doing this, but, like, somebody says something really dumb, and I point it out, and then a lot of other people are like, yeah, you're really dumb, and they go far, and then it's like, it looks like it's dogpiling, when it's really like, I wanted to respond to this person, and I wanted other people to see it. Not my intention to dogpile, but, like, that's what happens. But then, like, what was Daisy supposed to do? Like, before she responded, like, go and look at this guy's entire history and research him and find out that, like, oh no, he's a protected group, I can't go after him. Like, if he had been a white male, like just a normal white male, like, it would have been totally fine for her to dogpile him, you know? Like, you see how that is, where it's like certain people you can't respond to and certain people you can.
This is the thing I'm struggling with. Like, two things. First of all, Daisy Ridley's character, Rey, in Star Wars The Force Awakens, is shown to be living on half rations for a prolonged period of time. So why would we not understand that she'd be small? And the assumption is that she's been living off half rations since she was a child, so she's going to be kind of tiny. I mean, I think that... And then we have Carrie Fisher in the same movie, which I think this criticism negates the fact that Carrie Fisher took a lot of crap for her weight, and she still had, you know, the cojones to get up there and be, this is my character, and I am going to take my victory lap, even though I know there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to body shame her as well. But then this is the issue I'm having as well, and I'm going to throw this over to Meredith, because let's face it, none of us are large individuals here. I'm probably the biggest of the three of us, and even then, I mean, I'm not going to call myself fat by any stretch of the imagination. But why is it somehow okay if it's an able-bodied, you know, straight, cisgendered white man? Why is it okay to tell them off on Twitter, but the minute it's revealed that it's a developmentally disabled 17-year-old girl, why is that suddenly off limits under the paradigm of we're all people and we're all equal and yada yada yada? Like, I know we all sort of recognize that, yes, there are some people that are expected to be able to take it and not others. However, like, Meredith, I wonder if I could get your comments on this.
Well, okay, here's my thing. Here's what Daisy said. Daisy said,
yes.
To quote the thing is, I will not apologize for how I look, what I say, and how I live my life, because what's happening inside is much more important anyway, and I'm striving to be the best version of myself, even if I stumble along the way. For anyone who has a problem with anyone in life, be them someone you know or someone you don't, remember that expression: if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Kindness isn't going to cure the world of its awfulness, but it's a good place to begin. I mean, obviously her stuff, there was a little bit more about The Force Awakens, but ultimately, it's just a very nice post about loving yourself. There's nothing in there about how terrible the person that posted it was. It was just that she's just kind of tired of getting. Don't stop eating my cord. Sorry, my cat is eating my cord. It's not like she was asking people to incite a mob mentality on this person. She was not calling this person out specifically. I think, you know, as all of us have now experienced, you get enough crap on the internet. I think it's okay to address it every once in a while, especially in such a positive manner. And regardless of who this person was, I think what Daisy's message was rings true. To be very honest, especially for someone who might be suffering some sort of, you know, mental or physical disabilities, because it's basically saying, be happy for you and be positive for you. I mean, you know, that, I mean, I mean, I can't say anything because I am a able-bodied, cis, norm person. I'm a white girl. Sorry, I don't know all I haven't figured it all out. I'm white, I'm straight, mostly. I'm very thin now. You can see it. I don't even know why. I lost a lot of weight. And Daisy's message really, it makes me feel better because of all the crap I get online. And I would like to think that if, you know, I shared that, especially with some of, you know, my friends who, I do know some people who work in child development services, and I think they would probably actually like to share that message. So why does it matter? I don't think it does. I don't think it should matter. Sorry, I'm just sitting here reading this. I'm like, I'm blown away that fans. Let's take away the people aspect. Let's call it what it is. That fans are so fickle that they would sit here and turn on a person because this is what they do. This is my problem with fandoms, is that they find a cause and they get so caught up in it that they lose the message. You know?
That's no different than politics. I mean, I think this is the complaint that a lot of middle-of-the-road people are having, that I think really when they say we want to get the politics out of comics, or we want to get the politics out of gaming, or all this stuff, it's actually we want to get this tribalism out of everything. Because, I mean, you know, I'm sure, you know, Ash, you can speak to this on the political beat. You'd like to see a lot of the tribalism out of what you do for day jobs too. Am I right here?
Right, and I see, like, it's getting worse. Like in 2008, there was this insane obsession with Obama, and the Republicans looked at that, all of his, like, followers who would, like, no matter what he did that should have, like, affected them, we all watched it and were like, you people, like, what is wrong with you people? You're like in a cult. This is insane. And then 2012, the same situation. And then here it is 2016. And apparently it wasn't that Republicans were looking at like, oh my God, you guys are crazy. You're in a cult. They were actually being like, we want our own cult. Because now you see this year, and you've got all these outspoken liberal women who are just like gung-ho Hillary, just she's a woman, so Hillary. And then you've got the Bernie Sanders supporters, and then you've got the Donald Trump supporters, and then you've got the Ted Cruz supporters, and the Marco Rubio supporters, and the John Kasich supporter. But like you just see this like these tribes, right? That it's like now it's all tribes. And if you're seeing it online, if you're seeing like conservative Twitter, that people that I've hung out with, I've drank with, I've partied with, I've consider my friends, all attacking each other because you support Ted Cruz or you support Rubio, or you inexplicably support Trump now. And it's just like they're just friendships are being torn apart within the party now because of this tribalism, and it's just gotten so insane to me. And I think the left is facing that a bit with the Sanders versus Hillary people, but
I can't believe how nasty it's gotten.
Yeah, it's just insane, where it's like I experienced it in 2008 where, because I just got political that year, where, you know, I had friends and discovered they were liberal, and that, you know, I say I'm conservative, and then they start, you know, making fun of me and being like awful to me. So it was like I lost friendships. Like, you know, after the election, I had someone who I thought was my friend be like, ah ha 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 ha, you lost. Like, suck it. And it was like, you kidding me? Like, never gonna talk to you again. When it was like, you knew that I was working on a campaign, so this was like my future right here that just kind of like fell apart. So Yeah, thanks for that. So I had to lose a lot of people, and you learn who on Facebook can remember that you're friends and still politically disagree with you, and that, I lost a lot of friends that way, and now it's like I'm just trying to like stay out of the massive arguments and everything, because I'm like, I like you. Wait, why do you like Trump? I like you. You support Cruz. That's fine. I like you. You support Rubio. Why do you hate each other? Like,
Yeah.
getting to the point where I'm just like watching my friends lose their goddamn minds over this stuff, and I'm just like walking away.
We see that a lot in our party too, with the Democrats. So with our whole, if Bernie doesn't win the nomination, I'm not going to vote at all. So if it, the whole idea that if it came down to a Hillary and Trump election, that they hate Hillary so much that they wouldn't vote Hillary, and they
We're
would
on that side. They hate
Huh?
Trump so much. They
Yeah.
hate Trump so much. Now, I've seen, and this is just from Reddit, which, take it with a grain of salt, but it's an idea that would actually kind of make me laugh, where they're Sanders supporters who are saying that they hate Hillary so much, and if Bernie isn't the nominee, they're going to vote for Trump to continue the burn it all down idea. And I'm just
Well,
okay, guys.
that's consistent with the fact that, I don't know if you guys saw this chart that came up. A Washington newspaper did a poll of sort of values, core values of various, and Trump and Sanders supporters correlate on an extreme anti-establishment, anti-elitism axis.
Yeah.
And so it actually makes sense that not only, and this is true of the niche stuff we're talking about, the gaming, the comics, everything like that. All this stuff replicates, which is why I think it's so relevant. It makes sense that Bernie supporters jump to Trump if they lose Bernie as an option. It also makes sense that these are the two groups like literally coming to blows in Chicago last night. Now everybody knows when this was recorded, but the fact that Bernie Sanders and Trump supporters are doing their own weird sort of West Side Story right now, brawling in the freaking streets with slogans. It's crazy, but at the same time, if you spend any sort of time in these sort of, I call them bellwether hobbies, that comics and video games, this makes sense to us. We have seen people who should have a lot in common just tear each other apart because, and I think it goes back to the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing, and this is one of the things I want to sort of talk about, the role of media in uncertain times and setting an example. Because right now I'm seeing sort of, okay, we've got, the basic needs, food, shelter, all that stuff. We've all sort of dealt with this in the first world to varying degrees. The safety issue, we know crime rates are dropping, even though we're all sort of, it gets beaten into us that, oh no, it's so unsafe, child abduction and things like that. Logically, we know crime rates are dropping. We live in a safer world than we did even, 20 years ago. So now we're getting into the love belonging part of the pyramid. And we're seeing a lot of this. It's not, I support a candidate, it's this candidate validates something about me. And by candidate, it can be a comic book, it can be a video game. And I mean, I see this because I'm a cosplayer. I do a show about cosplay. You see people who identify very strongly with this particular character. And that's why I disagree with the way comics are just yanking a character out. Because if somebody feels very strongly about, Peter Parker validates me.
Yep.
And you pull Peter Parker out of relevance, people are going to get upset the same way I got upset when Lara Croft's boobs shrunk, and all the video game characters. So I kind of get this identity thing in politics. The thing that is curious and kind of disturbing, and I guess we'll just sort of go around here. Meredith will go to you with comics, and Ash will go to you with politics. why is this validation? Why is this belonging so vulnerable right now, in your opinion, that people are making threats, trying to menace people online, and even sometimes coming to physical blows?
You know, I want to brush it off and say it's entitlement, but it's not. You know, it's more than entitlement. You know, it's really okay. So, like, circling back to kind of what I said earlier, is that there's so much media out there for people to consume. In all reality, there's a comic out there for everyone. It might not be the comic that you're reading right now, but it's out there for you. So why does suddenly now Captain America have to change to fit your one particular mold when it's already fitting all these other molds? When you can hop over to X-Men, where there's a beautiful myriad of characters who will fit everyone's mold, because that's what X-Men was always meant to do. So I don't understand. I'll be very honest. I don't understand why people are coming to blows over this, because they don't have to. We don't need to change Peter Parker. We can have Miles Morales and Peter Parker and Spider-Gwen, as we've seen. They all exist now in the same world. That's great. But we don't need to change these core characters to fit any one particular mold, because even within these same publishers, there's already great, wonderful characters that are established, or new characters being introduced for people to come and love. So why do we have to change these core characters to fit a percentage, a small percentage people? Now, that could be a growing percentage, but let's just take me for an example. I am a 35-year-old woman who has been reading comics since she was 8 years old. I don't want Wolverine to change. I'm cool that Laura Kinney X-23 is running around in the Wolverine costume. That's great, but I really miss Wolverine. I don't give a crap that Old Man Logan's back. I don't really like Old Man Logan. I want Logan Wolverine back, young, youthful, snarky Logan. I want him back. I don't like that he's dead. It's ruined comics for me. In fact, I've kind of actually pulled away from Marvel Comics a lot lately, because there's been a lot of changes, and I don't feel they know their own identity. And that's kind of my problem, is that when a company loses its identity, it confuses readers, and not just their established readers, but me trying to explain to new readers, because I do a show called Marvel Podcast, Marvel Movie News, and a lot of people are like, oh my god, I love these films, how can I get into comics? I'm still recommending older series, because while Marvel's still trying to get their crap together, it's kind of hard to be like, well, if you really like these characters from the films, don't start on the new stuff, because the stories aren't all that great right now. They need time to build to be great again. And I say this with love, because many of my friends are working on these new stories, but it's just not a great point to jump into it, because we don't really, it's just on shaky territory. I think there's going to be some great stuff coming up, like Daredevil Punisher by Charles Soule is going to be fantastic. I really like the current the current Iron Man is really good. But, you know, these are going back to kind of these characters that I love. The new Angela, the Angela
Queen of Hell.
Queen of Hell, so freaking good. And you know, and that's even taking a character from another publisher and they brought it over. So
yeah, but that controversy, you can't say that anymore because of that one panel, you know, the unsolicited opinions of Israel meme. That was enough, having not read the book, to put people off of it. I mean, I can't say, because I think Marguerite Bennett, writer on that book, but that is like, you cannot praise that book anymore because of that one thing that went viral.
Also, for the record, guys, she's foreign. She's not from America, so she's got some different ideals and beliefs and senses of humor and politics that might not align with things from our own country. Just saying, just putting that out there. That's another thing I feel Americans in particular, and you could probably speak to this, Liana. Americans are very entitled. This is why I will say the entitled thing. We are very entitled that our opinion and our belief structure must sorry, I'm fighting for words because I have not had coffee and it's very early for me.
Oh.
I know. Our beliefs, everyone throughout the world must hold our beliefs, and that our views on how racism has been in America, how politics have been in America, how we view progress in America, the rest of the world must see it the way we have and the way we've experienced it. And to that I say, step outside your country, step outside your news, watch BBC America, watch Al Jazeera, look outside, because the rest of the world doesn't think the same way we do. The rest of the world is actually, most of it's pretty more progressive than we are, certainly a lot more well-informed, I'll give it that. But, you know, I spent some time recently with my godfather, who's British, and having that, it made me feel, it gave me a lot more perspective again recently, and I need that shake-up because, you know, I know the panel you're talking about in Angela, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot how the rest of the world views Israel, not within just America's confines, and how we would jump to conclusions, especially the internet, who probably isn't very well-versed on the Israel-Palestinian conflict.
Well, I mean, yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to say that personally, I feel that America is more binary than the rest of the world, and that's just a structural problem. You guys have a two-party system.
Mm-hmm.
Us up here, we have a three-party system, and this is why, because we have these electoral reform issues up here all the time. There's talk about moving away from our first past the post voting, one person, one vote, into something like mixed proportional, which I'm like, oh God, no, because that is Israel's political system, and a lot of the issues come down to structural stuff. But then it's like ranked ballots, which is like, oh, that might be kind of interesting. But I mean, right now, we have this strange thing up in Canada where we have a prime minister that anybody outside our borders knows.